What's going on, guys? This is Evan the Dark Souls enthusiast, bringing another Dark Souls gameplay on the Xbox 360. This is going to be some Dark Souls player versus player commentary. This is the most requested thing on the channel, so I figured I'd go ahead and deliver. Sorry there hasn't been a video upload in a number of weeks, but I got pretty buried by finals, and as I've said in numerous videos, I am a student, and it can be a little brutal at times. Typically it's a really nice lifestyle. Your primary focus is just to learn stuff, which is, in my opinion, maybe one of the greatest objectives of all is to learn. Not to say I spend all my time reading encyclopedias. I mean, I spend most of my time wasting away on video games. But my point still remains that it's nice to know that your primary function, or at least your primary goal, is just simply to learn, and that's something I'm pretty fond of. With that said, it does have its low points, like finals week, and there's just a ton of homework to do. But anyway, enough of that. This is mostly Darkmoon invasions, in the area outside the forest or near the forest, a couple on Anor Londo. This is the first of a series of videos I got before I had access to Darkmoon Blade. This is me trying to farm up Darkmoon Blade, because you have to get, I think, 80 souvenirs of reprisal, and I figured, what better way to do it than just to PvP and get them the hard way instead of, well, the easy way instead of farming harpies. Plus that gives me an excuse to commentate some PvP. I've been playing some other games that have just come out, like, Hornet's Ring backstab. Armored Core just came out, and I'm a big fan of Armored Core. Armored Core 5, I don't know if I'd recommend it as, the end-all, be-all Armored Core game, but everyone should buy it. It's going to make the series go mainstream. It's got some problems, but it's still a fun game to play, so I enjoy the Armored Core games quite a bit. So I've been playing Armored Core 5 a lot, and my original intention was to bring some of that to the YouTube channel, but unfortunately, it's pretty tough to get a good Armored Core 5 gameplay on the Xbox 360 right now, largely due to the community being fairly inactive and people still trying to figure things out, myself included, so there's just not a whole lot of good matches. When the game launched, the servers were jacked up so no one could buy parts, and if anyone knows anything about the Armored Core games, if you can't buy parts, you might as well not be playing the game, because half the appeal is in the customization and design of your mech. So that's some odds ends there. I think Armored Core 5 might be the first game I'll bring some live comm to the channel on, because the game is much better suited to a live commentary style than sort of a structured post-game commentary. And this guy in PvP in here, there's been a lot of opportunities for me to backstab him with my Hornet's Ring S-Stock. This is actually a dexterity-based character, but I carry a Chaos S-Stock as the secondary sidearm for when my buffs wear off, and a Hornet's Ring to try to go for the backstabs, the coveted backstab strategy that is my least favorite, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, and this has been one of those long matches where we're back and forth, where I got off to a bad start, so now I'm trying to grind it back by pecking him down with the S-Stock. Using a Hollowed Soldier shield, I'm not really sure why. Post-patch, that shield kind of lost a lot of its luster there. For those of you that haven't been playing Dark Souls, since launch, the Hollowed Soldier shield used to be the best shield in the game, and now it's really not, which is interesting to say the least, that it's gone from sort of a coveted position of the best shield ever, short of a few rare instances where you use something else, to being a worse shield. It's actually, he's trying to parry my S-Stock pokes, but that's just, I'm trying to vary my timing, because I don't want to, if he gets a parry off, I'm so low life, I'll instantly die. In fact, if he got a parry off at any time, I'd probably instantly die. This is a 30 Faith Vitality, or I'm sorry, not Vitality, this is a 30 Faith, sort of 48 lowish Vitality build. Comes with a lot of weaknesses, and I'm pretty squishy, so I usually get one-shotted by most people's parry counters. Even on I sort of make 50 Vitality my target goal in any PvP character unless I'm gouging. Anything below that is kind of not ideal, and I do have a couple builds that fell below, like this one didn't quite get to 50 Vitality, which was unfortunate. But either way, I'm still one-shot candy for backstabs, and that's a tragedy. This is also the first time I played Dark Souls, and maybe, or at least PvP in Dark Souls, maybe 7 days, so I'm really rusty, and as the commentary goes on, this is a sort of a 20-minute session. As the commentary goes on, you'll see that I start to pick things up and get a hold of things, and this guy just goes right in for the backstab, so I decided I'm going to try to backstab him back. He's using, of course, a lightning katana. I can't pronounce any of them correctly, except an Uji katana. It's like the lightning Lido, I think. And I struggle against katana players. I always have. You'll notice even in the kiln, I have trouble with katana users. Recently, I've been doing better because I was using strength weapons, and you can usually hit stun them into victory if you know what you're doing. But when I go dex on dex, like, I struggle really bad. Dexterity on dexterity weapons is not my strong suit. In fact, dexterity weapons in general aren't my strong suit. And with that said, I wanted to talk a little bit about, so far, my experiences using different weapons in Dark Souls, popular weapons that are requested, things I've used, things I haven't used, and why they're popular, and etc. So for dexterity weapons, the non-buff kind, you know, it's pretty much a katana with an elemental enchantment. Personally, if I'm going to use an elemental weapon as my main, and it's going to be dexterity, I really like the washing pole. It has a lot of reach. It still has the mandatory 300 bleed to make a katana good. It has a ton of reach on the running stab. Phantom hits like crazy. I highly recommend the washing pole for an elemental katana. For elemental strength weapon, so 1D or a claymore, just depending how much you want to go into the strength category. I really am not going to go through sort of an exhaustive list of every weapon either, but I think those are just good starting points. Let me rephrase by saying these are good starting points for weapons. These are weapons that if you're trying to break into PvP, start with these because they're not that hard to use. An elemental builds are the best place to start, really. With that said, elemental starter weapons for PvP. Claymore's great for, you know, a 16 strength build. Zawandier is good for like a 24 strength. Vitality Gouger. Black Knight Great Axe is great. You know, the simpler the weapon is to use, the better. Katana's great. I guess if you want to practice backstabs like crazy, Chaos S-Stalk's a great choice. I chain backstab that guy, which is really rude. I saw the family mask and the Havels, and I just decided to go for it. That's something I try to stay away from, so try not to copy that strategy if you're watching these for like tutorial, the sake of tutorial, because chain backstabbing like that is sort of the epitome of rude. But as I was saying, good starting weapons for dexterity are, you know, any of the katanas are fine. I like the washing pole. For the strength weapons, Claymore is kind of the end-all be-all for a beginner weapon. Zawandier is a close second. Then you get into some weird strength weapons that I don't know a lot about because I've never really done a weird strength weapon. Intelligence characters will probably always wind up on the Moonlight Greatsword in almost any build. Faith characters will... I don't know. You know, it's hard to do an exhaustive list of every weapon. There's so many good options, but I guess ultimately my big point here is try not to use... A lot of the weapons people think are cool just really aren't that good, which is definitely something to think about when you're picking your first weapon you want to learn. I made the mistake when I first wanted to learn that I wanted to use the Boulder Sword. And the Boulder Sword is an amazing weapon. The Boulder Slide Sword is absolutely fantastic. The reach on it's nuts, and it's what I'm using in these videos. But it doesn't hit stun very well, it doesn't break through poise very much, so you really rely on your spacing. When you're relying on spacing, it's more of a dueling weapon and an evading weapon. And as a rule, that means harder to use. A lot of those weapons are great in the long run once you learn to use them, but when you're new to the game, you want to start with something simple. So I think the simplest weapons are basically poise crushers and, you know, claymores, great swords. Great swords are poise crushers, and they're a great weapon to start with, followed by katanas. And you want to stick to the elemental paths, so you'll have more vitality. For those of you that aren't familiar with Dark Souls builds in PvP, basically, in my experience, they kind of fall into 3 categories, with a lot of like variations on each. But basically, the gist of it is you have an elemental weapon build where you get just enough stats to build your weapon of choice, then you pump the rest of your points into vitality, every spare point you can. You usually don't have any secondary like magic or anything like that. It's literally all or nothing kind of strategy. It's really good. It's probably the easiest character to play for single player and multiplayer. You know, PvP, Phantoming, highly recommend it. So, great starting point. And next up, you see people that are using like, I guess like the unique weapons, like either Black Knight weapons or Dragon Slayer Spear. Like, It's sort of a cross between gimmick builds or Black Knight weapons. Pretty much when you're talking about using unique weapons, I consider them all to be rather gimmicky and more of a novelty weapon than an actual good weapon, aside from using the Black Knight weapons or the Moonlight Greatsword, because the Moonlight Greatsword is the end-all be-all of intelligence weapons, for the most part. Unless you're doing like Crystal Magic Weapon, Record Rapier, or something like that. But okay, after you have sort of the gimmicky builds, then you have the final class of builds, which is the buff builds. Buff builds are usually the most unfocused of builds, and there's a variety of different buff builds. It's sort of a catch-all category for using Sunlight Blade, Darkmoon Blade, Crystal Magic Weapon, Greater Magic Weapon. Really, any of the buff moves that don't come from a resin is ultimately what happens here. So you take a unique weapon that can be enchanted, or you take a weapon to plus 15, and then you get, say, 30 Faith to do Darkmoon Blade or Sunlight Blade, or you get, what was it, 18 Intelligence to do Greater Magic Weapon, etc., and that boosts your AR to the point you're greater than elemental weapons. And then you just go for it. That's pretty much the whole premise of the build. They're hard to play, in my opinion, because you wind up sacrificing a lot of points that you could have put into Vitality to grab those support points for other moves. And then I get chain stabbed. You know, it goes around, comes around. I stabbed that guy earlier in the video, and then I get chain stabbed later in a fight I was pretty sure I was going to win. Of course, he decides he's going to taunt me with the Chandlers Dance, which I decided to leave in the video because it looks pretty sweet. But, you know, there's infinite variations on builds in this game, and I'm sure someone's probably tried and made them all with their, you know, the bottomless box glitch really sped things up for a lot of people, but since I don't use it, it takes me a long time to make these characters. With that said, I did say earlier I was going to talk a little bit about, like, weapons that a lot of people are requesting the channel, and I can put them out there because I have characters that can wield them, but there's a lot of weapons that people really like that either aren't that good or are really hard to use, and that's not a bad thing, so much as you just have to accept, like, if winning, you know, frequently is part of the requirements for you to have fun, or in my case, I like to win at least roughly half my matches to put on YouTube. I don't want to scrub all my matches and put on YouTube, for example, at least not often. And, oh, see, this is the guy I've been fighting from before, and Flameberg enchanted poise breaks a lot more than my Boulder Slide Sword, and I just don't think he adapted to my strategy. In fact, I know he didn't, which is why I swapped to the Flameberg. Very poor reach, not a very fast attack, but when it gets you good. Oh, by the way, if you ever think of using a Flameberg, don't even look at the bleed effect. The odds of you ever being able to bleed somebody with a Flameberg are pretty slim, and if you pull it off, your opponent probably wasn't very good anyway. But with that said, sorry, it's late, and I wanted to throw this commentary out there. I haven't put a commentary in a long time, and people are still requesting videos. But yes, I was going to talk about weapons that people request that I'll put on the channel eventually, but don't expect me to win a lot, and don't expect to win a lot if you use them. I miss an easy backstab there. Pretty embarrassing, really. He's throwing Gwyn Spears. If they hit me, he'll probably one-shot me, because they hit so hard. This has a Gravelord Sword, but some of the popular weapons I keep getting requests for are like, so a lot of the unique weapons seem to resonate with players because they either like the boss that it comes off of, or they think it's cool, they want to see like the challenge of using one, and that's all fine. But like, for example, the Dragon's Tooth actually gets requested a fair bit. Havel's weapon. Okay, the issue with that is it has huge requirements to wield it, and even if you meet them and do wield it, it leaves you open to backstabs like crazy. And here we have duping trash using the overpowered heal item of the game, and I accidentally roll off. That match was disheartening, and I had to stop and go eat some food and come back and keep playing. But like videos that weapons I want to respond to, they request a lot. Reichard's Rapier, that's a strong choice if you want to buff it, and I don't particularly favor buff weapons very often, particularly not weapons without poise. My experience for the most part while using the Reichard's Rapier is if my opponent isn't scared of it, they win. You start R2 poking, which is really the only thing that makes the weapon dangerous, and they immediately sort of just take a hit from the poison and beat you down. At least that's been my experience. Other things that people are requesting a lot, Velka's Rapier, which is my favorite weapon in the game personally. that and Moonlight Greatsword, both intelligence weapons. But unfortunately, Velka's Rapier just does crap damage compared to the Moonlight Greatsword, and the stat requirements are actually harder on the Velka's Rapier since you probably aren't pumping dex on an intelligence caster. So I don't know. That's another one of those weapons where I can put it out there, but it'll become a lot of pecking with the shield up and a lot of backstab fishing for the extra rapier damage, because the moveset on Velka's Rapier, while extremely cool, is just generally not too effective. The Scythe is requested a lot, the Great Scythe. And the Great Scythe is absolutely a very viable weapon. It's great. It bleeds like crazy. It's got huge reach. It's got a nice moveset. The only real issue with the Scythe is it's very easy to parry and very easy to backstab punish. So, for example, if you're playing against someone who has, say, Chaos S-Stock and a Hornet's Ring and their Vitality Gouge, they've got, let's say 80-ish Vitality, some Pyromancy backup, and then they have, the Great Scythe. And then you have the Great Scythe. If you use the Great Scythe effectively, you either have to make it elemental or you have to buff it. So we'll go with the fact that you have an elemental Great Scythe. Slightly higher stat requirements than an S-Stock, so you might have 70 Vitality. Not a huge difference there. Okay. So the Great Scythe weighs a good bit, so you probably, if you're not using, you might be using Family Mask. It's hard to say, but that's a factor, is yours weighs more than theirs. And if they just rock a strategy where they just have a White Knight shield or a Crest shield, it really doesn't matter. Anything that's it's probably a Crest shield, that seems to be catching on. I used to see White Knight shield everywhere, now I see his Crest shield or Grass shield. So let's say they have a Crest shield. If they just hold the block button and stay up in your face, all of your attacks are extremely easy to parry, because the closer you are to a target, the easier the parrying window. So they're really up in your grill, so that it's much easier for them to parry your attacks. You have to be extremely careful. Alright, so you're already being hesitant to attack due to the, the omnipresent, the all-powerful, parry, which will probably instant kill you or at least drop you to a quarter of a life. And then you have to survive, the numerous attacks that can occur when they stand up, i.e. the Pyromancy, Flame Touch, and stuff like that. And as you can see, I swapped to a weapon here that was too heavy for me to carry. I should have just kept using the Rapier, but I switched over to this foolishly. This is the Lito, my Elemental Lito, which really isn't a very good choice, because it doesn't break poise at all, so people like this who have a ton of life and a ton of armor can just poise through it and beat me down. But this actually turned out to be a lot closer than I thought it would be, particularly with me losing half my life to those screw-ups earlier. Probably could have won that fight if I had played a little differently, but I get my mandatory point down taunt that I just edited out. But as I was saying, when you talk about the Scythe, and I spent a lot of time on the Scythe because the Scythe is so heavily requested, and I didn't have a Scythe ready to actually do a PvP video with the Scythe. So just understand, it's very easy to be parry punished. Not only that, but also all of the attacks have huge attack windows, so they can easily step behind you and backstab you. Now, with that said, there's a lot to be said for the Scythe. If you can maintain your spacing, it's very hard to punish because you're too far away from people to run in and backstab. It's all about maintaining just the right distance, the sweet spot. With the Scythe, you have to be very aware of your range, be just close enough to hit them. It's just the problem becomes when you get people that have Giant's armor, poise stack, chargers that just get really close to you, and then there's not really a good way to get away from them. At least not in my experience. So, that's just my thoughts on the Scythe. I'll eventually try to get a video up, which will probably defeat most of the discussion on the last 5 minutes of this video, but there's something to think about for people that are trying to make a Scythe, because I know the Scythe resonates well with players. It was the second or third weapon I tried on a character, and I immediately learned that it was just too high on the learning curve for me to start with that weapon. I really think it's really important when you're going to get into PvP to start with a very simple weapon that there's a lot of videos out there for using. I think the best starter weapons quickly are Claymore, Moonlight Greatsword, a Katana, and a Black Knight Great Axe. The Black Knight Great Axe and the Moonlight Greatsword being non-elemental builds, and then everything else being an elemental gouge. Those are probably the easiest characters to make for single player and for PvP, so that's just a thought if you want to make a character that can do both on your first playthrough. Some other things coming up on the channel. I have another PvP video to upload probably tomorrow or the next day. It's already made. And I also I'm really excited about this. I'm actually going to do one more Dark Souls playthrough. It won't be as rapid as my last one, but I'm going to play through Dark Souls one more time. on New Game Plus, and that will be my last Dark Souls Let's Play video. It will not be commentated live. It will be another post-game sort of commentary. It might be structured in such a way that instead of finding every single item, it'll be a let's power through the game, skip all the non-essential areas, and that way I can show sort of a, not a speed run, but sort of an expedited run through New Game Plus. That way everyone can see the difficulty of New Game Plus, see New Game Plus bosses, and more importantly, they can, I don't know, the Let's Plays were popular on this channel, so I guess I should put on another one, right? Well, anyway, that's pretty much the end of the video here. Finish my duel with this guy, and I'll be out until the next series of PvP videos from this night. Most of my PvP videos will now be playing this character, trying to get my Darkmoon character leveled up. And I'm also working on making my final PvP build, a Great Lord's Greatsword build, because that's also heavily requested, and it's gimmicky too, but it's actually pretty viable if you know what you're doing. But alright, that's the end of this video series. Thanks everyone for watching, those of you that are new subscribers, and my old subscribers that have stuck around sort of the big break, you know, the week-long break in content. I appreciate everyone staying around. I'm glad you like my stuff. Alright, I hope to see everyone next time.